I, 29F, have been with my fiancé Jake, 31M, for 3 years. We've had a really solid relationship for the most part. Good communication, shared values, a lot of laughs. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and my sister Mia, 26F, recently got married. Mia and her husband, Tyler, 28M, are great together, and their wedding was beautiful. Mia asked me to be her maid of honor, and I was really honored to do that for her. Everything had been smooth sailing, and I was looking forward to both celebrating Mia's big day and my upcoming wedding to Jake. Jake was invited to Mia's wedding, of course. At first, he was a little iffy about it since he doesn't have the best relationship with Mia, but he said he would go for me. They've always had a weird dynamic, mostly because of an argument they had a few years ago when Mia started dating Tyler. Jake thinks Tyler is kind of a wannabe tough guy, and Mia and Jake just don't really mesh well personality-wise. I've always tried to be the neutral sibling in their relationship, and I thought this wedding would be a good opportunity for everyone to get along, at least for the day. I was wrong. The ceremony was beautiful, the reception was fun, and everything was going as expected. I was busy running around with wedding duties, helping Mia with last-minute things, greeting people, and making sure everything went smoothly. Around halfway through the reception, I was talking to one of Mia's friends when I saw Jake and Mia arguing by the bar. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but it looked tense, and neither of them seemed to be backing down. At that moment, I had a bad feeling. I quickly excused myself from the conversation and walked over to break it up. I didn't want their tension to ruin Mia's day, so I tried to gently steer Jake away from the situation. He was pretty worked up and refused to leave without getting his point across, but I eventually managed to pull him away. When we were out of earshot of Mia, I asked what happened. Jake told me that Mia had insulted him. Apparently, she made a joke about his job, calling it less impressive than Tyler's career, and it really rubbed Jake the wrong way. I was frustrated that they were even arguing at Mia's wedding, but I could kind of understand why Jake was upset. Mia can sometimes be a little tactless, especially when it comes to teasing people. But still, I thought Jake should have let it go for the day. I told him that it wasn't the time or place to be having this argument, and that he needed to calm down. But Jake was beyond upset. We went back to the reception, but the atmosphere had shifted. I could tell that Jake was simmering, and I was really worried about how things would go for the rest of the night. I kept trying to reassure him to just relax, but it felt like nothing was working. Then, things went from bad to worse. Around midnight, when most of the guests were getting ready to leave, Jake had a full-blown meltdown. He started yelling at Mia in front of everyone, calling her spoiled, immature, and a bitch for insulting his job. People were shocked. I couldn't believe it. Jake had been drinking a bit, but I've never seen him act this way before, especially in public. Mia looked like she was about to cry, and Tyler, her new husband, looked like he wanted to throw Jake out of the venue. The whole room went silent, and the tension was unbearable. I was mortified. I rushed over to Jake and tried to get him to calm down, but he wasn't having it. I tried pulling him away, but he was shaking with anger. He shouted, "She's been disrespecting me for years. I'm not going to let her keep making me feel small." It felt like he was having some kind of breakdown. He refused to apologize to Mia, and honestly, I didn't know what to do. The wedding was ruined. People were staring. Some of them were even whispering to each other. Mia's day, which she had worked so hard to organize, was now overshadowed by Jake's outburst. Eventually, Mia and Tyler left in tears, and I was left standing there in front of our guests with Jake, who was still ranting about how unfairly he'd been treated. I felt completely embarrassed. I could barely hold it together. I told Jake that we were leaving, and we ended up leaving the reception early. It was one of the most awkward car rides I've ever experienced. Jake tried to apologize for his behavior, but he didn't seem to truly get the magnitude of what he had done. I kept asking him why he couldn't have just let it go for one day. His response was that he had to stand up for himself, that Mia was constantly belittling him, and that no one ever stuck up for him. But I knew this wasn't just about the joke anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about how Jake had ruined Mia's wedding, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I had planned to spend the next day talking things through with him, but when I did, I realized I couldn't just forgive him. I couldn't just brush off how badly he had behaved. The wedding wasn't even the first time Jake had acted out in ways that left me feeling deeply uncomfortable. There were other smaller incidents where he'd been dismissive or rude to my family, especially Mia and Tyler, and I'd brushed it off as just his way or just a bad day. But this was different. This was inexcusable. I ended up calling off our wedding. I told Jake that I needed time to figure things out and that I wasn't sure I could marry someone who would behave like this, especially on such an important day for my sister. He was completely shocked and tried to convince me that I was overreacting. He said he didn't ruin everything and that he was just standing up for himself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to make a tough decision. It's been a week since the incident, and Jake has been calling and texting nonstop, asking for forgiveness and trying to explain himself. But I just can't get past what happened. I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive him for ruining Mia's wedding like that. I feel torn between my love for Jake and my loyalty to my family, especially my sister. Now, everyone in my family is divided. Mia and Tyler are furious with Jake, and my parents are on my side, but also think I might be overreacting by calling off the wedding. Some friends say I should just go to therapy with Jake and work through it, but I don't know if that's possible. So, AITA for calling off my wedding after Jake's outburst at my sister's wedding? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after she ruined my wedding. I, 28F, recently got married to my husband, 30M, after being together for over 5 years. Our wedding was small but meaningful, with about 80 guests, close family and friends. I have a younger sister, Sarah, 25F, who is very important to me, though we've had our differences over the years. Here's where things get complicated. During my wedding, Sarah made a scene. To be fair, she had been acting off for a while leading up to the event. She would send passive-aggressive texts about my wedding plans, asking why I wasn't including her in certain decisions and complaining about the guest list. But I didn't think much of it because, well, that's Sarah. She's always been a bit dramatic. The issue started when Sarah showed up at my wedding wearing a white dress. Not just any white dress, but full-on bridal gown. She said she didn't want to look underdressed compared to the other guests, but that's not the issue. The issue was that she wore a dress that was almost identical to mine, complete with lace, a train, and a veil. It wasn't just a little white dress. It was a full-blown wedding dress, and it was clearly an attempt to steal the spotlight. I immediately went up to her and asked if she was serious. She was, and she said something along the lines of, "I don't want to look like a slob at your wedding." My husband was furious and told her that she couldn't stay in the dress. She insisted that I was overreacting. In front of everyone, she argued that I shouldn't be so insecure about her wearing a white dress. To make things worse, when we started our ceremony, she tried to sneak into the front row, almost as if she was trying to get people to mistake her for the bride. At that point, I was beyond frustrated, and I asked her to leave. She stormed out of the venue, and I was left feeling embarrassed and honestly hurt that my sister would do something like that to me on my wedding day. I didn't hear from her for a couple of days after the wedding, but when she finally reached out, she said I was being a bridezilla and that I was too sensitive. She claimed that it wasn't a big deal and that I should let her have her moment. She also told me that I embarrassed her by kicking her out of my wedding and that I was the one who ruined the day, not her. Here's where the problem really started. I had planned to let Sarah stay with me for a week after the wedding, as she lives out of state, and I thought it would be nice to spend some time together. But after everything that happened, I told her that I no longer felt comfortable with her staying at my house. I explained that I needed some space after what happened and that I didn't appreciate her actions at the wedding. She was furious and called me childish for not being willing to work things out. She accused me of making everything about myself and said that I was punishing her for something that wasn't even a big deal. Our parents have gotten involved, with my mom taking Sarah's side, saying that I overreacted and that I should just let it go. My dad, on the other hand, agrees with me, but doesn't want to get involved too much. He did say that I should probably try to talk things through with Sarah, but my mom's comments have been frustrating. She keeps telling me that it's just a dress and that I should let Sarah stay at my house to smooth things over. I've tried to explain to my mom that it's not just about the dress, it's about respect. I feel like Sarah deliberately tried to sabotage my day, and the fact that she doesn't even seem to acknowledge how hurtful her actions were makes it even worse. I don't feel like I'm being unreasonable by setting boundaries with her after everything that happened. Now, Sarah has been calling me constantly, demanding that I let her stay with me, and telling me that I'm being a bad sister. She says that I'm holding a grudge over something trivial, and that I'm punishing her for no reason. I'm starting to feel guilty, but at the same time, I don't think I'm the one in the wrong here. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after she ruined my wedding day. AITA for refusing to let my friend bring her kids to my wedding after she ignored my boundaries. I, 28F, am getting married to my fiancé, 30M, in a couple of months, and while we're both super excited, it feels like everything that could go wrong is. I'm starting to wonder if I've been too naive about the whole wedding planning process, but this particular issue has been really getting under my skin, and I'm genuinely torn about how I handled it. Let me give you some context. My fiancé and I have been together for 4 years, and we've always agreed that we wanted a small, intimate wedding. We're both from pretty small families, and we've always preferred the idea of a more laid-back, stress-free celebration. We both really wanted to avoid a huge, chaotic guest list and decided to keep it under 50 people, including our closest friends and family. We've also had a strong no-kids policy, which I know sounds a bit harsh, but it was something we both really felt strongly about. We've been very clear with everyone from the start that kids aren't invited. There are a few reasons for this. First, we really want our wedding to be about us and our relationship, and we feel like it would be difficult to have that focus with young children running around. Second, some of our friends and family have very young kids who are super loud and would likely cause chaos. Plus, we've already had a couple of issues with kids at other events we've been to, so we just knew it wasn't the vibe we were going for. Now, my friend Sarah, 29F, has been one of my best friends for over a decade. She's a good person, but she's always had a very different outlook on things than I do. Sarah has 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, both of whom are adorable but also notoriously wild. When I initially told her about the no-kids rule for the wedding, she seemed understanding. I even suggested that she and her partner, who I also adore, could hire a babysitter for the day and come to the wedding without the kids if they felt comfortable with it. But Sarah was really hesitant, saying that she wouldn't feel right leaving her kids with a stranger for the day, and she'd much rather just bring them along. I told her I understood her concern, but reiterated that our wedding was very important to us, and we had already made the decision to keep it adults only. I told her I'd love for her to come, but I couldn't make an exception for her kids because it would set a precedent for everyone else who had children, and we just couldn't accommodate that. I even offered to help her find a babysitter or make other arrangements if she needed help. I thought this was a fair compromise, but she didn't seem too thrilled about it. A few weeks later, she brought up the kids' issue again. She asked if I'd consider making an exception for her, as she felt it would be too much of a hassle to leave her kids for an entire day. I told her again that I couldn't make exceptions, and this time, I was a little firmer about it. I let her know that if she really felt like she couldn't leave her kids at home, maybe it would be best if she didn't come to the wedding at all. This conversation was really awkward, but I thought we had a mutual understanding. I didn't want to lose her as a friend, but my wedding day was important, and I felt like she needed to respect my boundaries. Then, a few days ago, I got a message from her that really threw me off. She told me that she had already booked her kids' outfits for the wedding and had decided that she would bring them anyway, no matter what. She basically told me that she wasn't going to leave them behind and expected me to be okay with it. She also mentioned that she couldn't believe I would ruin our friendship over something as small as her kids, implying that I was being unreasonable. I was honestly shocked. I thought we had already had a mature conversation about this, and I felt like she was being disrespectful of my wishes. After all, this is my wedding, and I don't think it's too much to ask for one day where I can enjoy it without worrying about other people's kids. I responded and told her that I would prefer she respect my boundaries, and that if she chose to bring the kids anyway, it would mean she couldn't come to the wedding. I also pointed out that we had discussed this multiple times, and I had made it very clear what my wishes were. She responded saying that I was being incredibly selfish and disrespectful of our friendship. I've been feeling super guilty since then because I don't want to lose her as a friend, but at the same time, I feel like she's completely disregarding my feelings. I've been going back and forth in my head about whether I'm being too rigid. Maybe I should just let it go and let her bring her kids, but I also feel like I've set a clear boundary, and it's not fair for her to push it. My fiancé has been supportive of my decision, but I can't help but wonder if I'm being too harsh. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend bring her kids to my wedding? Or should I be more understanding of her situation? I'm really torn, and I'd appreciate some outside perspective on this. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she kicked me out of her bridal party over a dress. I, 29F, have a sister, 27F, who I'll call Clara. We've always had a pretty close relationship, but recently things have started to get rocky. To give you some context, I'm married and have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Clara has been planning her wedding for over a year now, and as the older sister, I was thrilled when she asked me to be in her bridal party. I've always been supportive of her and her decisions, so naturally, I said yes without hesitation. However, things started to go south when it came time to pick the bridesmaids' dresses. Clara had a very specific vision for her wedding, and the dress was part of that. She wanted all of us to wear the same style, a very form-fitting, floor-length, off-the-shoulder gown in a bright coral color. The problem? I had just had my second baby, and I was struggling to lose the baby weight. I wasn't feeling particularly confident about my body, and the idea of wearing a dress that clinged to me in such a way felt really intimidating. I brought this up to Clara when she first sent me the dress idea, and I told her that I was worried about how I would feel wearing something so tight. I didn't want to take away from her day, but I also didn't want to feel miserable and uncomfortable the whole time. Clara insisted that the dress would look amazing on everyone, and she reassured me that it would work for all body types. Still, I wasn't convinced, so I suggested we look for some alternative options that might be a little more forgiving. I even offered to pay for a more customized dress if she could help me find something that was more flattering. She immediately shut me down, saying that the whole bridal party needed to match exactly. I felt a little frustrated, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. So I agreed to at least try on the dress and see if it would work. When the dresses finally arrived, I tried mine on, and I immediately felt uncomfortable. It was way tighter than I had anticipated, and I could barely breathe. My stomach, which still hadn't bounced back after the pregnancies, was on full display, and I just felt embarrassed. I showed my husband, who told me I looked beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't look my best. I sent Clara a picture of me in the dress and told her that while I understood her vision, I just didn't feel comfortable in the dress and wasn't sure if I'd be able to wear it at the wedding. I offered again to help pay for a more flattering alternative if she wanted to go that route, but I also told her I was willing to be honest and not wear something that made me feel self-conscious. Clara's response was immediate and not what I was expecting. She told me I was ruining the aesthetic of her wedding and that if I couldn't wear the dress, she would need to find someone else for the bridal party. I was stunned. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to steal the spotlight or cause drama. I just wanted to feel confident and happy, but she wouldn't hear it. She told me that this was her one day to have everything go perfectly, and if I couldn't put aside my personal feeling for the dress, then maybe I wasn't the right person for the job. I was crushed. I thought we were close enough that she would understand, but it felt like she was prioritizing the look of her wedding over my feelings. I thought about it for a couple of days and eventually told her that, considering how she'd reacted, I didn't feel comfortable being in her wedding at all. I told her I still loved her and wanted her to have the best day, but that I would be sitting out the bridal party and attending as a guest. To say she didn't take it well would be an understatement. She called me crying, saying I was being selfish, that this was her big day, and I was ruining it over something so trivial. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the dress, it was about how she had treated me after I expressed my discomfort. She said I was making it about myself and that I should get over it. Now, our entire family is involved, and they're all telling me that I'm being unreasonable. My parents think I should just suck it up, wear the dress, and be there for her. My husband supports my decision, but he also doesn't want the family to be upset. I'm just so conflicted because I feel like she's the one who's being unreasonable, but everyone else thinks I should just go along with it for the sake of family peace. I haven't made any final decisions yet, but I'm really torn. I want to support my sister, but I also don't want to be treated like I'm just a prop in her wedding. AITA for refusing to attend her wedding as part of the bridal party after she kicked me out for not wanting to wear the dress. AITA for refusing to pay for my best friend's wedding after I found out she had been lying to me for months. So a little background. I, 29F, have been best friends with Emily, 28F, for about 15 years. We met in high school and have been inseparable ever since. Over the years, we've shared everything. Our dreams, our fears, and of course, our ups and downs. We've also been through some pretty tough stuff together, and I've always been there for her. A few months ago, Emily got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Mark, 30M. I was thrilled for her, and when she asked me to be her maid of honor, I was beyond excited. I started helping her plan, picking out dresses, and brainstorming ideas for the bridal shower and bachelorette party. It felt like everything was falling into place, and she seemed so happy. But then, things started to get a little weird. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Emily kept mentioning how much everything was going to cost and how stressed she was about the budget. I offered to help out with whatever I could, whether that meant helping with the planning or contributing money if needed. She assured me that everything was under control, but it was clear she was starting to feel the pressure. The first red flag came when she mentioned needing a large sum of money for the venue deposit. I'm not exactly rolling in cash, but I've always tried to be there for Emily. I offered to help out, and she said it would be great if I could contribute around $2,000. I agreed, and we went on with the planning. But then, a few weeks later, she brought up needing more money for the catering and the photographer. This time, she said it would be around $3,000, but she made it clear that I didn't have to contribute the full amount. She just needed me to help cover what I could. I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable, but I agreed to help her again. As the months went by, Emily started asking for more and more money, and I started feeling like something wasn't right. There were always new expenses popping up, and each time, she would tell me she was short on funds and needed a little extra help. She even started guilt-tripping me by saying how much she wanted the wedding to be perfect and how much it meant to her that I was a part of it. Of course, I wanted to be there for her. I didn't want to disappoint her or be the friend who didn't contribute. I ended up giving her another $5,000 over the course of a few months. At this point, I'd given her a total of $10,000. That's a lot of money, especially when you're not exactly wealthy. But I figured it was for her big day, and I wanted to support her no matter what. Then, about a week before the wedding, I found out something that completely shook me to my core. I was talking to one of Emily's cousins, Sarah, at a pre-wedding gathering, and she mentioned something that caught my attention. Sarah casually mentioned how excited she was to see Emily and Mark's wedding at a resort out of state. I was confused because Emily had never mentioned a resort. She'd always talked about how tight the budget was and how they were just having a modest wedding at a local venue. So I pressed Sarah for more details. Turns out, Emily had been lying to me about the wedding plans the entire time. She wasn't having a small, budget-friendly wedding. She was having a lavish, high-end destination wedding at a luxury resort in the Caribbean. The venue cost tens of thousands of dollars. The catering was top-notch, and the photographer and videographer were high-end professionals. All of this was completely different from the story she had been telling me. I was in shock. I felt so betrayed. All those times she'd told me how tight things were, how she was struggling to make ends meet, and how much she needed help. I'd been paying for a luxury wedding, not the modest one she had led me to believe. And it wasn't just the financial betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that she had been lying to me for months. We had always been able to talk about anything, and yet she had kept this huge secret from me. I confronted Emily about it. I asked her why she hadn't been upfront with me and why she had lied about the wedding. She seemed genuinely shocked that I was upset. She apologized, but explained that she didn't want to tell me the truth because she knew I would get upset about the cost. She said she had been embarrassed about how expensive everything was and didn't want to make me feel obligated to contribute more. I told her that I was hurt, not because I couldn't afford to contribute, but because she had lied to me. She had made me feel like I was doing the right thing by helping her with a budget wedding, but in reality, I was paying for something far beyond that. I told her I couldn't justify giving her any more money for the wedding and that I wanted my $10,000 back. At this point, she got defensive and started saying that I was being unreasonable. She told me that this was her big day and that I shouldn't be upset over the details. She also said that the money was already spent and she couldn't give it back. She made me feel guilty for even asking, saying that I was acting like a bad friend. I was really torn. On one hand, I felt like I had every right to be upset. She had lied to me and manipulated me into paying for a wedding that was nothing like what she had described. On the other hand, I didn't want to make a huge deal out of it and ruin the friendship over something that had already happened. A few days after our argument, I decided that I couldn't go to the wedding. I wasn't going to be part of a celebration that I felt so betrayed over. I told Emily that I wouldn't be attending, and she was furious. She said I was making everything about the money and that I was ruining her special day. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the money, but she refused to listen. Now, everyone is telling me I overreacted. My other friends say I should have just sucked it up and gone to the wedding, that I was being too harsh. My parents think I should have paid for the wedding because I agreed to help, and now I'm just causing unnecessary drama. But my gut is telling me that I have every right to feel betrayed. So, AITA for refusing to pay for the wedding and not attending after I found out about the lies. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she tried to force me to change my hair color for the event. I, 28F, have an older sister, Julia, 31F, who is getting married next month. We're pretty close, but we have had some tension in the past due to differences in personality and life choices. I'm the more laid-back one, and Julia has always been very particular and controlling about everything, really. Growing up, she was always the one who tried to dictate what I wore, what I did, who I hung out with. I got the feeling a lot of the time that she saw herself as the golden child of the family, and I was just there to play the supporting role. I've always been someone who enjoys experimenting with my appearance, especially with my hair. Over the years, I've had pretty much every color in the rainbow at some point: blue, pink, purple, green, you name it. It's just something I enjoy, and I feel like it's an extension of my personality. I've never gotten any issues from work or anyone outside of my family for it, and the people I surround myself with are supportive of it. My parents are pretty chill about it too, as long as it doesn't affect my career or life in any significant way. When Julia got engaged, I was obviously excited for her, but I also knew this could be an issue. She's always been a bit of a perfectionist, and her wedding was already shaping up to be a big deal, with all the frills you could imagine. Expensive venue, designer dress, a guest list longer than some people's entire families. As the maid of honor, I knew I would have a lot of responsibilities, which I was more than happy to take on. But I also knew that Julia would likely have some requests. Still, I wasn't expecting what came next. A few weeks ago, Julia and I were having a conversation about wedding details when she casually mentioned that I should probably tone down my hair color before the wedding. At first, I thought she was joking. I mean, I know I have a reputation for rocking bold colors, but I didn't think it would be something that would actually be an issue at her wedding. But then she said, it's going to be a really formal event, and I don't want anything to distract from the aesthetic. It's not that I don't like your hair, but it's just a lot, I prefer if you could just tone it down a bit, maybe just a normal color like brown or blonde for the wedding day. I was taken aback. I tried to explain to her that my hair is a big part of my identity and that I would feel uncomfortable changing it for one day just to make it fit with her aesthetic. I've always had my hair like this, and it's something I'm proud of, but Julia kept insisting. She said that her wedding was supposed to be perfect, and having my bright pink hair would just clash with the overall look she had envisioned. I tried to reason with her. I said I was more than happy to help her with everything else, planning, organizing, making sure everything ran smoothly, but I wasn't going to dye my hair. It wasn't something I could just change on a whim. It's not like I could show up with dark brown hair and then a week later go back to my usual color. That's not how hair works, especially when you've been dyeing it a certain way for years. Julia got upset and started accusing me of being selfish and not supporting her on her big day. She said I was making it all about me and that my stubbornness was ruining this special moment. It was clear she wasn't going to back down, and I felt like I was being put in an impossible position. At this point, things got really tense between us. I felt like my own sister was trying to erase a part of who I am for the sake of her wedding's perfect image, and I was starting to feel like I was being treated like an accessory to her event rather than a person with my own identity and boundaries. I said, "I love you, but I'm not going to dye my hair for your wedding." She was clearly frustrated, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. "Well, if you're not going to do that, then I guess you shouldn't be in the wedding at all." That stung. I didn't want to cause drama, but at the same time, I felt like my sister was trying to control something that shouldn't be her choice. We didn't speak for a few days after that, and I started feeling conflicted. Should I just suck it up, dye my hair, and try to go along with her wishes for the sake of family peace? Or should I stick to my guns and not let her dictate something that's so personal to me? I eventually told her that if she wanted me to be part of the wedding, I was happy to still help in other ways, but I wasn't changing my hair. If that meant I couldn't be in the wedding or attend at all, then so be it. I told her I still loved her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice something that felt like such an important part of who I am. The fallout from that has been intense. Julia has told my parents that I'm being unreasonable and that I'm making everything about me. My parents have tried to stay neutral, but they're clearly leaning toward Julia's side. Some of my friends have said I'm being stubborn, while others have said I'm standing up for myself, and that Julia is being too controlling. My fiancé thinks I'm right, but he also thinks this situation might cause lasting damage to my relationship with Julia, which I'm worried about too. The more I think about it, the more I'm starting to question if I'm in the wrong. Am I making a bigger deal out of this than I should? AITA for refusing to dye my hair for my sister's wedding, even if it means not attending at all? So my 28F fiancé, 31M, and I are getting married in a few months, and we've been planning everything for the past year. We've spent a lot of time and money to make sure our wedding is perfect. We both come from relatively large families, and we're keeping the guest list pretty tight, but we definitely want the people who mean the most to us there. Now, here's the thing. My sister-in-law, Sarah, 33F, has 3 kids from her previous marriage, Jake, 13, Lily, 10, and Mason, 7. I have nothing against her kids, but the relationship between us is pretty strained, mostly because of her behavior and the way she's treated me in the past. Let me start with the fact that Sarah has always been a bit dramatic, to put it lightly. She can be extremely self-centered, and often, I feel like she makes everything about her. A good example of this is when I got engaged. I know it's normal for people to get excited when a family member gets engaged, but Sarah turned my engagement into her moment. She posted a whole Instagram story about it, but spent the entire time talking about how she had been dreaming of the perfect wedding for years, and how it was just so exciting to see me getting married, as if it was her big day. My fiancé and I were pretty uncomfortable with that, but we didn't make a huge deal out of it. I just tried to let it go, even though it bothered me. Fast forward to a few months ago, when I started sending out the wedding invitations. I only invited a select number of people to the wedding, keeping the guest list smaller to make it more intimate and manageable. When it came time to send an invite to Sarah, I made the decision to invite just her and her husband, but not the kids. I've had issues with Sarah's kids for years. Jake has always been rude to me, calling me weird and making snide comments whenever we're together. I try to get along with him, but honestly, he's just kind of a brat, and I don't see the point in going out of my way for him anymore. Lily is fine. She's sweet enough, but she's also a bit of a handful. She has a tendency to throw tantrums when things don't go her way, which I just find exhausting. As for Mason, he's still a little kid, so I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other about him, but I've seen enough to know he's prone to tantrums like his older sister, and I just don't want to deal with that on my wedding day. I didn't think much of it when I decided not to invite the kids. My wedding is a special day for me, and I felt that it would be much more peaceful and enjoyable without having to worry about the chaos they often bring. So I sent the invitations to Sarah and her husband, with the note that they were welcome to come, but that it was an adults-only event. That's when things started to spiral. Sarah called me up and was absolutely furious. She said it was disrespectful and hurtful not to invite her kids, especially since her family has always been close-knit. She kept saying that it was not a real family wedding if her kids weren't there, and that I was choosing my wedding day over family. Honestly, I was stunned. She's never once apologized for the way she's treated me, and now she's acting like I'm the one who's being unreasonable. I tried to explain to her that this wasn't about the kids, but rather about wanting a peaceful, adult atmosphere for the day. I also said that I had limited space and had to make tough decisions, but she wasn't having any of it. She told me that if I didn't invite the kids, she wouldn't come at all, and that I was making a huge mistake. She said that I was ruining the relationship between us, and that she wouldn't forgive me if I didn't change my mind. My fiancé and I had already discussed the guest list extensively, and we agreed that we weren't going to change it, so I told her that the decision was final. She hasn't spoken to me since that conversation, and honestly, I'm feeling a bit conflicted. I know it sounds harsh, but I'm just really tired of being pushed around and dealing with unnecessary drama. I want my wedding day to be as stress-free as possible, and dealing with her kids' behavior just feels like it would add a lot of unnecessary tension. I don't think it's unreasonable to want to have an adult-only event, especially considering the circumstances. Now, my fiancé is starting to feel some pressure from his family to reconsider. They've been telling him that it's wrong to exclude the kids and that it's causing a rift in the family. My own family is mostly on my side, but some of them are telling me that I should just make the concession and invite the kids to keep the peace. But I feel like I'm already compromising enough by inviting Sarah and her husband without having to invite the kids too. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law's kids come to my wedding? AITA for calling out my sister after she disinvited me to her wedding because I refused to attend her bachelorette party? I, 28F, have a sister, Kayla, 30F, who I've always been very close with. We've had our disagreements in the past, like any siblings, but generally, we get along pretty well. Recently, she got engaged to her fiancé, Chris, and it's been a whirlwind of wedding planning. It's clear she's excited, and I'm genuinely happy for her, but it's also been a bit overwhelming at times. The issue started with her bachelorette party. Kayla had this idea of a weekend getaway to a luxurious spa resort, and she invited all her bridesmaids and close friends. The guest list was small, about 10 people, but she was super adamant about it being an exclusive trip. I was included in the invite, but honestly, I was torn about attending. To give some context, I'm in a very tight financial situation right now. I recently lost my job due to some corporate restructuring, and while I've been doing freelance work, it's not consistent or lucrative enough to cover expenses like a lavish weekend getaway. I love my sister and would love to be part of her celebration, but I knew I couldn't afford the resort stay, the travel costs, and the other expenses associated with the weekend, like dinners and activities. I had a conversation with Kayla about it, explaining that while I would love to be there for her, financially, it just wasn't feasible for me. I asked if there were other ways I could contribute, maybe by helping with decorations, organizing the bridal shower, or just being there for the wedding itself. Kayla wasn't thrilled with this response and told me, in no uncertain terms, that she really wanted her bridesmaids to be there for the full experience and that it was important to her that I make the effort to attend the bachelorette weekend. I tried to be upfront with her. I said, I totally get it, but I can't go. I just don't have the money for it right now. It's nothing personal. She seemed a bit hurt, but said she understood. I thought that was the end of it, but a week later, she came back to me and said, look, I've thought about it, and I feel like if you can't be there for me for something like this, it's not really fair for you to be in my wedding at all. I really want people around me who are 100% committed to supporting me, and if you can't even make it to the bachelorette, I just don't know if you should be part of the wedding. I was floored. To me, this felt like an overreaction. I understand that weddings are big deals and that she wanted everyone to show up, but disinviting me from the wedding over one event felt extreme. I tried to explain again, Kayla, I swear, it's not that I don't want to be there. I can't afford it, and I just don't have it in me to go into debt for this. She just said, it's not about the money, it's about showing up for me when it matters. Then she added, I can't have you in my wedding if you won't even be there for the bachelorette party. I felt so betrayed and confused. I love my sister and had always supported her, but this felt like she was putting so much pressure on me over one weekend event. I understand that the bachelorette is important, but disinviting me from the entire wedding because of it seemed so dramatic. After a few days of stewing over it, I responded, "Okay, if that's how you feel, then I won't be at the wedding. But it's really unfair of you to put me in that position." She didn't reply for a few hours and then sent me a message saying, "Fine, I guess you can't be bothered to show up for me, and I don't need that negativity in my life. Don't bother coming at all." I was heartbroken. This whole situation felt so out of left field, and I didn't know what to do anymore. Our parents tried to intervene and suggested that I apologize and at least attend the wedding, but I felt like I was being forced to choose between my financial stability and my relationship with my sister, which seemed like an impossible decision. A few weeks later, she called me and said that she had talked it over with Chris and that they decided they still wanted me to be part of the wedding, but only if I could prove I'd make the effort to attend the bachelorette party. I told her that I couldn't do that and asked if I could just come to the wedding itself and maybe contribute to something else in a way that didn't involve me going into debt for a weekend getaway. She didn't take this well and ended up telling me that if I wasn't all in for the bachelorette weekend, she didn't want me in her wedding at all. I felt like my sister was emotionally blackmailing me, and it really hurt. So now we're at a point where we haven't spoken in a couple of weeks, and I'm feeling both devastated and conflicted. I didn't want to lose my sister over this, but I also feel like she's being unreasonable. I understand that she has high expectations for her wedding, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair for her to put that kind of pressure on me, especially when finances are tight. My friends and some family members are on my side, saying that Kayla is being too harsh and that it's unreasonable for her to expect me to spend money I don't have, especially since I'm still trying to recover financially. But other family members think I should just suck it up and attend, saying that I'm being too stubborn and should just figure it out because it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. I don't know what to do anymore. I love my sister, but I feel like I'm being forced into a corner. AITA for standing my ground and not attending the bachelorette party, even if it means losing my place in the wedding. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I, 29F, am getting married in a few months to my fiancé, Tom, 31M. We've been together for 6 years, and while we've always talked about getting married, things got a little complicated with COVID, and we ended up pushing back the wedding. Now, we're finally in a position to start planning for real, and we're really excited. However, this has brought up some serious issues with my family, and I'm not sure if I'm being unreasonable or not. Let me give you some background. I come from a pretty traditional family. My mom and dad, both 55, have always been fairly well off. My dad is a successful business owner, and my mom has a high-paying job in finance. I also have 2 brothers, Jake, 27, and Ben, 34. Jake is married with 2 kids, and Ben is single and hasn't had the best track record with holding down a stable job. Ben has always been a bit of a wild card, but he's family, and I love him. My parents have always been very involved in my life, sometimes a little too much. They've always been the kind of people who think they know what's best for me, and while I appreciate that they care, it's been frustrating at times. They've always had very clear ideas about what my life should look like, and when Tom and I got engaged, they started pushing their own agenda on the wedding. They wanted us to get married in a church. We're not religious. Have a huge wedding with 300 people, and insisted that I should wear a massive traditional dress. I've always been a little more laid back, and I had a completely different vision for my wedding. Tom and I decided early on that we wanted a small, intimate wedding with just close friends and family. We wanted to be a celebration of our love, not an event to impress people. We're planning for around 50 people, and we've been saving for it for a while. We're paying for the wedding ourselves, but we're working on a pretty tight budget because, honestly, our savings have been stretched thin after a few financial setbacks in the past couple of years. Tom lost his job during COVID and was unemployed for a while, which set us back a bit. I've been working full-time, but it's been difficult to save much since the cost of living is so high. Here's where things started to go south. I sat down with my parents a few months ago to talk about the wedding plans. I wanted to be upfront with them about how we were approaching the whole thing, Basically, that we would be paying for it ourselves and weren't asking for any financial help. But I also wanted them to know that we weren't going to be doing a big traditional event. They didn't take it well. My mom was absolutely furious. She said that if we weren't going to have a big wedding, we might as well elope, and that she would be too embarrassed to tell anyone that I was getting married in such a low-key way. My dad was a little more reserved, but still clearly disappointed. They both kept saying that I was throwing away an opportunity for a once-in-a-lifetime celebration, and that they expected more from me. My mom even said that if I wasn't going to have a traditional wedding, I wasn't allowed to wear the family heirloom veil, which has been passed down for generations in our family. At first, I thought this was just their initial disappointment, but they didn't let up. They started making comments about how I should have gotten more help from them, even though we had told them that we were doing this on our own. They even brought it up during family gatherings, which started to feel pretty uncomfortable. The thing is, I didn't ask them for money because I didn't think they'd be on board with the kind of wedding we wanted, and I wanted to avoid any drama. But over time, I started to feel a little resentful. My parents are doing fine financially, and they could easily contribute to the wedding if they wanted to. They've helped Jake and Ben with major life events in the past, including paying for their weddings. My brothers didn't have to struggle financially or get into debt for their big events. But when I looked at my own situation, I realized that I didn't have the luxury of asking for help. So, a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to my parents and asked if they would be willing to contribute a little towards the wedding. I didn't ask for anything huge, just a small contribution that would help us cover some of the costs. I told them that I understood if they still didn't want to, but I thought it was worth asking. My mom completely lost it. She said that I was being entitled and ungrateful, especially after all the sacrifices they'd made for me throughout my life. She told me that if I wasn't going to have a traditional wedding, I shouldn't expect them to fund my poor choices. My dad didn't say much, but echoed my mom's sentiments. I was honestly crushed. I felt like I was being told that my choices were wrong and that I wasn't deserving of the same kind of support that my brothers got. I tried to explain to them that we're not asking for a massive amount of money. We just want a little help to make the day a little less stressful. But it feels like they're making this a much bigger deal than it really is. Now, I'm left feeling torn. I know that asking for financial help can be tricky, but I don't think it's unreasonable to want a little assistance from my family, especially when they've helped my brothers before. I don't want to feel like I'm asking for too much, but I also feel hurt that they're so unwilling to support me. My fiancé has told me that he's fully on board with whatever I decide, but I can't help but feel guilty. So, AITA for asking my family to help pay for my wedding after they refuse to contribute, especially when they've helped my brothers in the past. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with us after she called me a failed mother. Okay, so this is kind of a long story, but I need some perspective because my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. I'm 33, married to my husband Ben, 34, and we have 2 kids, a 6-year-old boy, Nate, and a 3-year-old girl, Emma. Our lives are pretty busy, but we manage. Ben and I are both working full-time, and we've managed to create a routine that works for our family. Now, my sister-in-law, Jenny, 32, is married to Ben's older brother, David, 36. They have no kids, and they've been married for about 7 years. Jenny has always been, well, let's just say she's not the best when it comes to understanding family dynamics. I'll admit, I've never been super close with her. She's always been a bit distant and, in my opinion, judgmental of my parenting choices. About a month ago, Jenny and David's house had some major plumbing issues, and they were forced to stay somewhere else while repairs were being done. Ben and I have a big house with plenty of room, so we offered to let them stay with us for a week or 2 while they sorted things out. I didn't mind the idea at first because, as family, I wanted to help them out. We've had family stay with us before, and it's always been fine. Jenny and David arrived, and honestly, it was a bit of circus. Jenny has always been one of those people who likes everything to be perfect. She's super neat and organized to the point of being obsessive. She kept making comments about how messy our house was, and how we should really do more to childproof everything, even though our kids are older and know better than to touch certain things. She also kept giving unsolicited parenting advice, especially when it came to Emma's bedtime routine, which is something I've always been very strict about. Now, I don't mind a bit of advice here and there, but Jenny's comments were starting to get under my skin. She kept saying things like, "Oh, I would never let my kids, when they eventually have them, stay up that late," or "Your kids' eating habits are going to ruin their health." To be honest, I felt like she was subtly implying that I wasn't doing a good job as a mother. The thing is, she doesn't have kids, and she doesn't understand the reality of balancing work, household chores, and raising children. I let a lot of it slide because I didn't want to create drama, but it was wearing me down. Then came the final straw. One afternoon, Ben and I were having a conversation in the living room while the kids were playing. Jenny overheard and came over, unsolicited as usual, to chime in. She told us that we were failing our kids because they weren't in the best school district. We've always been happy with their current school, and the kids are thriving, but Jenny went on and on about how we should have made more of an effort to move to a better area. She even had the audacity to tell me that if you really cared about their future, you'd be making better decisions. I was honestly floored. Who says that? Especially without even knowing what we've done for our kids' education. I tried to brush it off, but I was getting upset, and Ben could tell. We got into a small argument afterward because Ben thought I was being overly sensitive. He's a lot more laid back than I am, and he kept telling me to let it go. But I couldn't. I was mad, and I started thinking that this wasn't just a little criticism. It felt like a personal attack on my role as a mother. A few days later, Jenny came to me while I was in the kitchen and said something that made my blood boil. She asked, "Can we talk?" And when I agreed, she told me that she was worried about how I'm raising my kids. She said, "You know, your son seems so hyperactive, and Emma is always so clingy. Have you considered that maybe you're not doing enough to make them independent? I'm just saying, I could never let my kids behave like that." At this point, I'd had enough. I told her that I didn't need her input and that maybe it was time for her and David to find another place to stay. Jenny was shocked, and she started arguing, but I stood firm. I said, "You've been here for over a week, and I'm done with the constant judgment." Ben was upset when he found out. He said I was being unfair and that I should have just let it go, especially since Jenny and David didn't have any other place to go. But I was firm in my decision. I told Ben that I couldn't tolerate the way Jenny had been treating me and undermining my role as a mother. I felt like my own sister-in-law didn't respect me, and I wasn't going to let it continue. Ben tried to talk me into changing my mind, but I didn't budge. He ended up telling his brother, David, that Jenny and he needed to leave. David was disappointed, but understood. Jenny didn't take it well, and she hasn't spoken to me since. The rest of the family is divided. Ben says I could have handled it better, but my parents and some of my friends think I was completely justified. So, AITA for kicking my sister-in-law out of my house after she called me a failed mother. I feel like I was within my rights to stand up for myself, but now I'm questioning if I overreacted. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding after she tried to make me the maid of honor without asking me first. So, a bit of backstory. I, 28F, have a sister, Lily, 26F, who's getting married in a few months. Our relationship has always been a bit rocky, especially in adulthood. Growing up, we were pretty close, but over the years, things have become strained. I'm not going to go into everything, but she's always been the type to expect things from people without considering how it affects them. A few weeks ago, she called me to let me know that her wedding was coming up and that she'd like me to be her maid of honor. Now, this may sound like a sweet gesture, but I was genuinely blindsided. First of all, she didn't ask, she just told me. Second, she hadn't even asked me about my schedule or if I was available to take on such a role. She didn't even seem to care about my opinion on the matter. I have a very busy life, including a demanding job, my own relationship, and personal commitments. I told her that I would love to support her, but I didn't feel I could handle the responsibility of being a maid of honor at this point in my life. I also gently reminded her that we hadn't really been close enough in recent years for me to take on such an important role. I offered to help in other ways, like with decorations or organizing things, but I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable being the maid of honor. She immediately became defensive, accusing me of not supporting her and being selfish. She then dropped the bombshell that she was disappointed because she had already ordered my dress and had planned everything around me being the maid of honor. I was shocked. She had already made all these plans without even checking with me if I was okay with it. To be honest, I felt a little bit manipulated. I told her I wasn't comfortable wearing the dress or being in the role, and I thought it was pretty rude to make assumptions about what I would or wouldn't do. I also said that it felt like she wasn't respecting my boundaries or my time. She said that I was ruining her special day and that it was too late to back out now. She even told me I owed it to her as my sister to do this, as she had always been there for me. This is where I started to get really frustrated. Yes, we've had moments where she was there for me, but we also had plenty of times where she was selfish, disrespectful, and demanding. I felt like she was twisting the situation to make me feel guilty, and I was really uncomfortable with how she was handling it. The argument ended with her saying she would just deal with it, and that she would figure something else out, but she hasn't spoken to me much since. Then, a few days ago, she sent me a message saying that if I wasn't going to be her maid of honor, then she would have to take me off the list of people she was expecting to contribute financially to the wedding. This is where I might be the asshole, but hear me out. I'm being asked to pay for a lot of things I didn't agree to. First, I was told I needed to pay for the dress, which I didn't want in the first place. Then, I was told I needed to contribute to the venue, the catering, and other expenses. I don't know where the assumption came from that I was financially responsible for a significant part of her wedding, especially after she made all these plans without consulting me. I felt like she was trying to manipulate me into paying for a wedding that I was already uncomfortable with. Now, she's upset and telling everyone in the family that I'm being petty and ruining her big day. The rest of the family has reached out to me to express disappointment and to tell me that I should just get over it and support her. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. I don't mind supporting her in ways I'm comfortable with, like showing up to the wedding, helping with planning if she asks, or even attending some pre-wedding events. But I don't think it's fair for her to expect me to financially contribute when I didn't sign up for that. I also don't think it's fair that she tried to push me into the maid of honor role without asking first, and then tried to guilt trip me when I refused. So, AITA for refusing to pay for the wedding and not accepting the maid of honor role after my sister assumed I would do both without asking. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her emotional support dog to my wedding. So, this all started a few months ago when my fiancé and I began planning our wedding. We've been together for over 5 years, and this day has been something we've both been dreaming about for a while. We decided on a fairly traditional ceremony and reception with a guest list of about 150 people, including close family and friends. I'm not going to lie, I've been really excited about this day, and as much as I want everyone to be comfortable, I also wanted things to go smoothly without too many disruptions. That's when the issue with my sister-in-law, Sarah, came up. Sarah is married to my older brother, James. They've been together for about 7 years, and while we've had a pretty good relationship over the years, there's always been some tension, mostly because of how Sarah tends to overstep boundaries. I'm not saying she's a bad person, but she can be a little much at times. The problem started when Sarah reached out to me a couple of weeks ago to ask if she could bring her emotional support dog to the wedding. For some background, Sarah has had this dog, Milo, for about 3 years. Milo is a small, very cute, but very hyperactive dog who she claims helps her manage anxiety. Now, I don't want to invalidate anyone's mental health, but I've always found her claims about Milo to be a bit exaggerated. She's mentioned before that she gets anxiety in certain social situations, but I've never seen her have a breakdown or anything like that in all the family events we've attended. It's always been a just-in-case situation with the dog. Anyway, when she asked if she could bring Milo to my wedding, I was honestly a little shocked. I know that emotional support animals are legally allowed in some places, but I didn't think that included weddings. Weddings, as most people know, can be very structured, with a lot of people moving around, dancing, and interacting with one another. I could easily see how a dog would cause distractions or even accidents in such an environment. I politely explained that I didn't think it would be appropriate to have Milo there for the wedding. I told her that we've already organized seating arrangements, planned out the ceremony, and I wanted to ensure the day went as smoothly as possible. I also mentioned that the venue is a beautiful but somewhat fancy place, and that I wasn't sure if it was the best setting for a dog, especially given the fact that we would be having a sit-down dinner and dancing afterward. Sarah didn't take this well. She immediately started going on about how I was being inconsiderate and that I didn't understand how important Milo was for her. She said that without him, she wouldn't be able to function properly in large social settings like weddings, and that I was essentially ruining her experience on my big day. I tried to stay calm and reassured her that I wasn't trying to upset her, but I still didn't think it was a good idea to have Milo at the wedding. That's when she dropped a bombshell. She said she wouldn't come to the wedding unless Milo could be there. She claimed that her mental health depended on it, and she just couldn't be in a crowd without him. To be clear, I wasn't asking her to come to the wedding without Milo. I was simply telling her that it wasn't feasible for me to have a dog at the event. I was really upset by her ultimatum. This was my wedding day, something I've been planning for years, and I didn't feel like I should have to bend the rules just to accommodate her. I explained that I couldn't compromise on this one thing and that I really wanted her to be there, but if Milo was a non-negotiable, I would understand if she decided not to attend. That's when the situation escalated. Sarah started calling me selfish and inconsiderate to my face. She said I was being a bridezilla and that I was choosing my wedding over her well-being. I told her that I wasn't trying to diminish her mental health, but there were other ways she could manage her anxiety without bringing a dog to my wedding. It's not like I was banning her from attending. I was just setting a boundary around the event. The argument went back and forth, and eventually, she stormed off. Afterward, I got multiple calls and messages from my brother, James, telling me I needed to get over myself and let her bring Milo. He said that I was being unreasonable and that I had no right to control what she needed for her well-being. He even said that I should be more understanding given how close we are as family. At this point, I was feeling really torn. I wanted Sarah to come to my wedding, but I didn't think I was asking for too much by drawing a line when it came to the dog. I told James that I felt like I was being backed into a corner and that I shouldn't have to sacrifice my wedding for Sarah's comfort. He didn't seem to understand, and we ended up in a pretty tense argument, too. Now, we're just a couple of weeks out from the wedding, and Sarah and James are both telling me that I'm being unfair. Some other family members have even weighed in, saying that I'm being overly rigid and should just let it go for the sake of family peace. Others have agreed with me, saying that my wedding should be my day, and I shouldn't be expected to make huge adjustments just because someone else has an emotional support dog. I still don't feel comfortable with the idea of Milo being there, and I'm really hurt by how much this has caused a rift in my family. At the same time, I feel like I'm being portrayed as the villain for standing my ground. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her emotional support dog to my wedding. AITA for ruining my sister's wedding because I refused to play a role I didn't agree to. My sister, Maggie, is 2 years older than me, and we've had a complicated relationship our whole lives. We've always been close in some ways, but we're also very different people, and it's been hard to meet in the middle at times. We fought a lot growing up, especially when we were teenagers, but in the past few years, we've become better at communicating, and I thought we were in a good place. That was until her wedding came up. I, 29F, have been in a long-term relationship with my boyfriend, 28M, who we'll call Jake. We've been together for 5 years, and we've talked about getting married for the last 2. However, we've had a very different approach to weddings than Maggie. She's always been the type to plan out every detail of her big day, and she's been dreaming about this since she was little. I'll admit that I wasn't super excited for her wedding, but I was supportive. However, when it came time to ask me to be a bridesmaid, that's when things started to go wrong. Maggie asked me to be a bridesmaid a year ago. While I love her, I didn't feel great about it. Not because I didn't want to support her, but because I knew that being a bridesmaid would involve a lot of pressure, especially since Maggie has been known for being pretty controlling about the details of things. I told her I would be happy to help her with whatever she needed, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit to being a bridesmaid, given the stress that came with it. She was disappointed, but she respected my decision, or so I thought. She said it was okay if I didn't want to do it, but that I was still an important part of the wedding. This is where things started to take a weird turn. As the wedding planning progressed, I thought things are going okay. We talked a few times about what she needed, and I helped her when I could. Then, about 6 months before the wedding, she called me up and asked if I would be willing to walk down the aisle with her. Not as a bridesmaid, but just to escort her during the ceremony. I was confused at first, so I asked her why she didn't want someone else to do it, like one of her bridesmaids or her dad. She explained that she felt like she wanted someone close to her who wasn't involved in all the bridal party drama and just wanted to keep things simple. She even said she didn't want it to be too traditional and that it would mean a lot to her if I did it. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but after talking to Jake and other people close to me, I decided I'd do it. I thought it might help repair some of the tension between Maggie and me, and it would be a way for me to show support without getting too involved in all the stress of being a bridesmaid. Flash forward to the week of the wedding, and Maggie starts to drop little hints. She asked me to help her with last-minute things, like picking up flowers, organizing the reception space, and running errands. I agreed, but each time I did, the task kept getting more and more demanding. By the time we reached the day before the wedding, I was exhausted, and it was clear that Maggie had started to treat me more like a wedding planner than just her sister. The real issue came up when she told me, casually, that she expected me to give a speech at the reception. I was shocked. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with that. I had never been one to speak in front of a large crowd, especially not at a wedding. She was insistent, saying that it would be perfect because I was her sister, and it would make her day more special. I tried to explain that I wasn't prepared, and I didn't want to be put on the spot like that. She kept pushing, and I finally told her that I would not be giving a speech. She got upset and said I was being selfish. She even implied that I didn't care about her wedding, which was far from the truth. That night, after everything settled down, I went home and tried to mentally prepare for the next day. I was still feeling uneasy about the situation, and it didn't help that I was getting texts from Maggie about small details that didn't seem that important but added to the stress. I was supposed to walk her down the aisle, help with last-minute details, and now she was expecting me to do a speech. At that point, I felt like I was losing myself in all of her demands. The next morning, I got to the venue and immediately felt overwhelmed. Maggie was already there, and she looked beautiful and happy. But I could tell she was anxious, and that's when I realized she might not be fully aware of how much pressure she was putting on me. I took a deep breath, did my best to smile, and helped with whatever I could. But I'd made up my mind about the speech. I wasn't going to do it. As we were getting ready for the ceremony, Maggie pulled me aside and said, "I'm really disappointed that you won't do the speech. I thought you'd have my back on this." I told her that I couldn't do it, and I wasn't going to try to fake my way through it just to please her. She got upset, and our conversation quickly escalated into an argument. She started crying and saying that I was ruining her wedding by not stepping up when she needed me. I felt terrible, but I also knew I wasn't being unreasonable. At that point, I just needed a break, so I went to sit down in the back of the venue and waited until the ceremony began. Maggie eventually came to me, and the tension was still there, but she agreed to let me walk her down the aisle without further pushing the speech issue. The ceremony went off without a hitch, but the reception was a different story. Maggie avoided me for most of the night, and whenever I tried to talk to her, she would either shut me down or brush me off. At one point, I overheard her telling her friend that I was being so selfish and that I didn't care about her wedding. I felt like everything I had done up until that point to help her had been erased in an instant. Eventually, I left early. I was hurt, frustrated, and emotionally drained. I tried to reach out to Maggie a few times after the wedding, but she hasn't responded to my texts or calls. I feel like I've been painted as the villain here, and I'm honestly confused about what I could have done differently. All I wanted was to be supportive in a way that felt right for me, but now I'm questioning if I messed up by standing my ground. AITA? AITA for confronting my sister about borrowing money and never paying it back? I, 29M, have a sister, 31F, who has always had a bit of a live-for-today attitude. Growing up, she was always the one who wanted the latest gadgets, clothes, or anything that seemed fun and trendy. My parents were pretty financially stable, so it wasn't much of a concern when she would ask for things here and there. But as we got older, it became clear that she didn't have a good grasp on money management. I've always been the opposite. I'm pretty conservative with my spending, I save what I can, and I've been able to build up a decent emergency fund. I also got to do a good job after college, and while I don't make bank, I'm financially comfortable. My sister, however, has had a string of bad financial decisions. After college, she bounced from one job to another, and never really held anything steady for more than a year. Her credit score has been awful for as long as I can remember. A couple of years ago, she hit a rough patch financially and started asking me for money. The first time, I wasn't hesitant to help her out. She needed money for rent, and I knew she was struggling. So, I lent her $1,000 with the understanding that she would pay me back in 2 months. Fast forward 4 months, and I still hadn't received a dime. I didn't want to push her too hard, but I reminded her a few times about the loan, and she would always give me vague promises about paying me back. At first, I was patient, but after a while, I started to feel like I was just being taken advantage of. After about 6 months, I realized I wasn't going to see that money again. She had a new boyfriend who seemed to be living with her, and she'd bought a new phone, a bunch of clothes, and even went on a weekend getaway with friends. Meanwhile, I was still waiting for the $1,000. I was angry but didn't want to blow up about it, so I let it go. Then, last year, she asked me for money again, this time for a business venture. She wanted to start an online boutique selling handmade jewelry. I was skeptical, to be honest. She didn't have any background in business, and the idea sounded pretty half-baked. But, against my better judgment, I lent her another $2,000. This time, she said she would pay me back in 3 months once the business took off. Again, 3 months came and went, and I heard nothing from her. At this point, I was seriously frustrated, but I also didn't want to make things worse by demanding the money back too aggressively. I'm not the type of person who likes conflict, and I hate confronting people, especially family. But it started to eat away at me. I would see her posting about her boutique on social media, showing off new inventory, taking trips, and buying things. I was still getting nothing. Finally, about a year ago, I reached my breaking point. She was having a birthday party, and I was invited. I knew I wasn't going to get my money back anytime soon, but I felt like this was the moment to finally bring it up. I don't know why, but I decided I would speak up. At her party, I pulled her aside and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about the money I lent you." Her face immediately went blank, and she started to look uncomfortable. I said, "I'm still waiting for that $3,000 you owe me, and it's been well over a year now. I've been patient, but I can't keep doing this." I didn't want to make a scene, but I was firm. She got defensive right away, saying, "I've been dealing with a lot, and I'll get to it when I can. You know, I've had things going on." I said, "I get that, but this isn't just about a little bit of money anymore. You've been taking advantage of my kindness, and I can't keep letting you do that. You owe me, and I need it back." She started to cry, saying that I was being unfair and that I was pressuring her when she was already stressed enough. At that point, I felt guilty. She's always been emotional, and I hate seeing her upset, but at the same time, I felt like I had every right to be frustrated. The conversation ended there, and she promised to figure something out. After that, I didn't hear from her for a few weeks. But then, she started posting on Instagram about going on a trip to Mexico with her boyfriend. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I shot her a text that read, "I see you're having a great time in Mexico. Meanwhile, you still owe me thousands of dollars. I don't want to sound harsh, but this is getting ridiculous." She called me right away, furious. She said I was being a bad brother and that I was making her feel terrible. She told me I should let it go because it's just money and that we're family. I told her that if we're family, then she should take this seriously and pay me back instead of blowing through cash on vacations and shopping sprees while I'm still waiting for my money. We haven't spoken much since then. My parents are on her side, saying I shouldn't make such a big deal out of it, and that family should help each other out. My friends have mixed feelings, with some saying I'm in the right for standing up for myself, and others saying I should have just let it slide because it's family. I'm feeling conflicted now. I hate that things between us are so strained, but I also can't keep being the bank for someone who never follows through. So, AITA for confronting her about the money, or should I have let it go and just been the bigger person?